Welcome to another episode of the Inspired Hive podcast. This is the show for entrepreneurs, leaders, CEOs, and professionals looking to rise to next levels of success. Join us each week as we explore leadership, innovation, and the entrepreneurial journey, fueling your mind with the inspiration and strategies to make your vision a reality. As a leader, Dr. Stacy Hardy-Chandler combines her background and training in social work, clinical psychology, law, and organizational leadership to promote innovation that honors individual and dynamic microsystems. She believes that paradoxically, the future of leadership in a complex and ambiguous world requires understanding the ancient wisdom and power of we-ness, the interconnection. She brings this wisdom to her service as the CEO of an international regulatory organization, the Association of Social Work Boards, and as the first Black woman elected to serve as a council member for the city of Fairfax, Virginia. Let's hear what they have to say. Stacey, thank you so very much for making time for the conversation today and for sharing some nuggets of inspiration with our business and leadership community. I am thrilled to share time with you today, Dr. Stacy Hardy-Chandler. I've been inspired by your journey, and I am so excited to dig into conversations surrounding leadership, the mindset around leading an international organization, and the balance of contributions and conversations and that collaboration that you bring within two very different organizations of leadership that you're serving to the greater public good. Welcome to the Inspired Hive podcast.
It's my absolute pleasure to be here. Happy to be here. Happy to have this conversation with you.
I have gotten to know you a little bit through the years and having some conversation with you recently, I realized just there is so much behind how we get to show up in our everyday. And I am just so curious to hear a little bit about where your story began.
Yeah, absolutely. My story began in the beginning, right? In childhood. And I really do have to credit my mother for setting me up for the journey that I've had in life. She was an excellent parent, but also an excellent role model for leadership. She didn't have a lot of formal education. She actually went back to get her associate's degree with my older siblings, and that was pretty much the extent of it. But she highly valued education, but she highly valued um, doing what you say you're going to do. And because I'm the youngest of six, my sort of running joke with my siblings is she had all this practice on you guys. So by the time she got to me, she really, mastered the parenting thing. But yeah, I really appreciated growing up in my family, and our family name is Hardy. So that literally means resilience. And she was definitely the model of resilience. My father died tragically when I was young, so she had to be both mother and father, and she did it incredibly well. So that's sort of the beginning of the story. I would say that the next beginning was probably in the eighth grade, but I took a test, and my recollection is that it was sort of an aptitude test to sort of figure out what careers you should explore.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
that test, the results were that I should be a psychologist, a lawyer, or a nurse. Um,
Wow.
Not too fond of what nurses have to confront, didn't even consider law at all at that time. So psychology it was. I mean, that resonated for me. Growing up in my household with my family, that was really about being connected and engaged in the community. That value of serving, that felt to me like it aligned with my family values, but also
Mhm.
my interest in people. So I totally, Margot, embrace that identity. So fast forward to the third beginning. And I would say that that was in college. I graduated with my psychology degree a little bit early. So, with my freshly minute undergraduate degree in psychology, I got my job as a, say it with me, salesperson at a donut shop. Not exactly what I studied for, but it was a good stopover to my next role, which was working in a group home. Basically, it was
Oh.
congregate care for children whose behavioral problems kept them from staying in their homes and
Mhm.
that were too severe, basically, for them to stay with their families. And that's where I met my first social worker. And that
Wow.
was monumental because she did the most social worky thing ever. She didn't tell me to consider social work. She didn't say, "Oh, have you thought about social work?" And so she said, "Forget about whether or not you should pursue psychology or anything else." She said, "Just talk to people who are doing the work you think you want to do
Mhm.
and come back and tell me what you find out." And so I
Interesting.
did that because I do follow instructions. I did that, and the social workers I talked to had just a different energy. They had a positivity. Um, Most of them were counseling the kids in the group home, but they were like, I can do this, but I can do these other things. If I wanted to, I could pivot. And there was just an excitement about them that I wanted. I wanted some of that. So my memory is that I took my application down to UCLA like towards the end of when you could do it, like a Friday at 4:50. And this is
Turning it in.
19, yeah, this is, the 80s, right? So I'm turning in a paper application.
Yeah.
And in my mind, handing that paper application to the person in the office that day just shifted the trajectory of my life in a whole different direction. Those 2 years I was at UCLA, fell in love with social work, recognized that it was not just a career, but my purpose for being here. And I mean here with a capital H. And that's the way I felt for the next 40 years.
I love hearing this because it really, in each of those eras of your story, it really speaks into the people you surround yourself with.
Mm,
Um, and the lessons you take from just the experiences and the people you're with. And first off, bless you for being in a home with kids who can't be in their own homes, because that is such a gift to both them and their families. And it's something that shifts everybody's world. It shifted your
mhm.
world, and I know it shifted their worlds. And it's as though all of those childhood dreams could come alive once you knew what or felt where that purpose was landing. It's so
Right.
fascinating.
Yes,
Tell-
and fortunately, having a family or having people around me who always told me to pursue like what I wanted to, not to pursue something for, money or prestige or anything like
Mhm.
that, but, kind of a follow your heart sort of philosophy. So I feel like I was very fortunate because, you and I both know people who pursued paths that were not in alignment with who they are. And I was very fortunate to discover that very early on.
Yeah, and it makes such a big difference to the rest of your time, right? In terms of either keeping on searching for who that is or getting to be involved in the mission of what you want to do.
Mhm.
How, tell me a little bit about how the other degrees wove in then to your journey.
Once I went through my MSW program, I was on fire. That was such a rich, positive, wonderful, affirming experience for me,
Hmm.
that I felt like, regardless of whether I knew psychologists who had my background or came, had the same, experiences in life, I now felt empowered because of the success of having completed a master's degree in social work or social welfare from UCLA, that I could go on to a
Mm.
PhD. And I did. So I pursued that. But like so many people, I didn't come from wealth. I didn't come from even a family that had a college fund. When I was in high school, my mother and I participated in Upward Bound, but I did have to work while going through my PhD program. Fortunately, I worked as a social worker while I was pursuing my PhD, which, my young self,
Brilliant.
my young self didn't think it was as fun as those who were able to just go to school or who could afford to just go to school. I wished I could just focus on school. In retrospect, though, that work actually reinforced what I was learning in the classroom. And there was synergy there that I didn't appreciate at the time, but it ended up being a great experience. Finished my PhD, um, went into mental health direct services as a therapist. And I primarily worked for government agencies and then transitioned into academia. There was a colleague, and she asked me to cover one of her classes.
Ah.
And I was like, there is no, what do I have to say to a class? Why are you me? And she's like, you can do it. I'll give you my notes. It'll be fine. And it was, again, more than fine. It was this theme that became a part of my life. It's just be open. Just be open to
Mm.
opportunities. So although I didn't have any teaching experience at the time, I taught her class, started to like that, and then started to pursue jobs in academia, which is sort of like my second phase. While I was at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, um, they had a very generous employees and family program where you got just a really big discount if you went to school, and
Wow.
ended up teaching in the daytime and being on faculty at the School of Social Work there, but then walking across campus and then going to law school at night.
Oh my
And
goodness.
that was 4 years of part-time law school, but there was significant overlap between
Hmm.
law and the social work, and social work and the law. And there were a lot of legal issues that I was confronted with as a social worker, and it seemed like going to law school would help me be a better social worker. So had a wonderful time there. It was
Hmm.
truly to learn
And learn.
about the law,
Yeah.
and it was again for that reason a great experience. I guess the pandemic was very eye-opening in terms of you know, I think a lot of people rethought their lives, they rethought their priorities. Some people took up, knitting and different hobbies and did whatever they could in their bubbles. And during that time, I decided I was going to apply for uh, uh, school internationally because that's something I hadn't done. And just exploring. There were a number of universities that, because of the pandemic, were offering hybrid
Yeah.
models that, again, I would not have seen myself participating in, except for if it was
The
hybrid.
circum.
But Oxford had this wonderful organizational leadership program that they were offering in a hybrid model. And one of the things they talked about in that program was resilience. And so I said, well, I'll just take this one little step. And, I investigated the program. I'll take this next little step. I'll talk to one of the staff members. Well, I guess I will order my transcripts. The next thing you know, I had applied and was accepted. And never, again, never saw that in my path. As a matter of fact, I didn't tell my husband until I was accepted. And he,
The final
fortunately, was
hour.
so supportive, just like, go for it. I did the first module virtually, which my expectations were here. That virtual model hit here. It was immediately, I was using things from that program that week of that module. I said, I have to go in person. So I went to all of the final modules in person and just loved it, loved my classmates. Never ever thought I could go to an Oxford program, but it really was life changing. And that's how all of the other,
Wow.
degree stuff happened.
Yeah, I have so many questions. The thing that stands out for me is you take the action and then, right? It's not like, oh, I'll just figure out if I'm motivated for it. Like you find out about this step or the next step. And so there's the action that really is formulating that journey. You have to have good balance to accomplish all of what you've been doing, working and learning along with the work and applying it. Where does that balance come from for you?
You know, I think of sort of a lazy Susan. I have
Mm.
all of these things on the table, but a lazy Susan rotates. So I, at any moment, like right now, the most important thing is this podcast and this conversation, even though I have all of these other things on the table. And then as soon as this is over, I'll rotate the lazy Susan and something else will be the priority. So it's not like I have a lot going on, that's true, but not a lot going on in the moment because I really try to be present for each thing and then move on to the next thing that needs my attention. So if I'm meeting with staff, that staff member is the world, right?
Mhm.
For that period of time. They're my priority, even though other things may be going on. Or, school, whatever, it's just that you can rotate those things around and it's not like they're less important. And, fortunately, again, having the support around you, I have a family that is just, go for it. And I continue to keep people around me who will ask questions and will explore, but will never, you know, I don't know, impose their limitations.
Mhm.
And
I
if
love
they
that.
do, then they no longer stay in my circle, quite
Mhm.
frankly.
Mhm.
But a lot of supportive people who, explore, ask questions, make sure I'm looking at things 360 degrees, and then they're, go for it. So I keep very open people in my life and they help me stay open.
I love that. I love the analogy of the lazy Susan because so often the go-to analogy is the spinning plates. Like you have to keep
Hmm.
everything turning, but
Hmm.
the lazy Susan has it all, and it's a matter of where you're present in this moment. And people feel that. I can feel that through the Zoom even. And I think what a great mindset shift in that how to navigate the things in your world that you can turn and focus as you need. It's not that those other things are necessarily distracting at that time. And that's just so powerful. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Years of trial and error.
I want to go back to something you mentioned a while back, and that was the donut shop.
Uh-huh.
And maybe that's kind of unpredicted. I'm going back to that, but there's obviously sales and a different quality of service relationship involved in a donut shop versus a social work environment or a therapy environment. And I'm just curious if there were some lessons in there or some business components that you kind of have brought along with you through the journey.
Well, I think the main thing is, I'm never above anything, right?
Mm.
So here I was with my degree. I think I could have felt bad about, going through school and ending up in a donut shop and it was only for a few months, but I didn't, I knew that it was a stepping stone for whatever else was going to happen. And I uh, never feel like I'm above anything. So even now, as a CEO of an organization, if we need to move tables, we all need to roll up our sleeves and move tables. So I think the biggest thing is, at any moment, any of those things can be what you need to do, to move past a particular phase in your life, and just to accept all of that as, to your point, contributing,
Mhm.
giving or whatever. So it's not like, oh, I have to have this type of job or this type of role. I can. and will absolutely do what's needed to, to continue to thrive and to, help others thrive. So that was one thing. And I recall working with a coworker, and it was usually just the two of us in the shop, and his primary language, he was the baker, and
Mm.
his primary language was Spanish. And he would kind of give me little Spanish lessons while we were working together. Fast forward later on, when I was working as a therapist for a county organization, there was long waiting periods to see the Spanish speaking therapist. And I said, well, I don't know. And I also had another Spanish speaking colleague who shared the office with me. And she would also, speak to me in Spanish. So I said, I don't know if this will help, but maybe I could do at least the initial intakes for those who are waiting for the Spanish speaking therapist. My Spanish is not um, uh, good enough to conduct therapy. I would not ethically feel like I could do that, but I
Mhm.
could get information and be, sort of a touchstone on the way as people are on the waiting list to
Mhm.
see Spanish speaking therapists. So I volunteered to do that. I took a test. I took a test for the county, and I passed at the highest level of the Spanish language skills for some reason. But I was able to, for example, if people called and needed directions to the clinic, I could provide that. I did see clients who did walk-ins who were monolingual Spanish speaking and did the intakes, and again, provided that touch point with a human being while they were on waiting lists that were longer, of course, than for English speaking clients. All of that is gone now, but I think part of it had its origins in working with the colleague that I had in the donut shop.
Making the donuts, it's I keep going back to the it's time to make the donuts, but it is such a powerful reference for me in terms of you have to get into action to kind of make the progress, make things happen. And it just is so refreshing to visit with someone who all of the experiences in life is what's kind of knitting and quilting together. And that we learn by doing all of it, not by doing just the part we think we should be doing, right? And I'm curious what inspires you.
And again, everything inspires me.
Mhm.
I have this saying that everything is information. Everything is information. Everything is information. I mean, it may seem small. I get inspiration sometimes by just getting out of my car to get gas and looking up at the sky. I'll just smile because, what a glorious thing to be able to look at the sky at that moment. Um, People will say, "Oh, it's such bad weather." Unless it's destructive, a little rain isn't bad weather to me. I love how it refreshes the earth and everything seems clean. And so I'm inspired by a lot of things, but as you mentioned in the introduction, in recent years, I came across sort of this notion of Ubuntu and being very interconnected with other people. And again, this aligns with how I grew up and what I was taught as a child that, my mother would say, you are not a success unless you bring other people with you. You
Mm.
can't do anything on your own, right? So this interconnectedness really resonates with my beliefs. So I'm certainly inspired by other people and my connection to other people, and sort of the bidirectionality of that
Mhm.
you hopefully are lifting others up as they too are lifting you up. I wouldn't call myself a practicing Baha'i, but my spiritual beliefs are most aligned with the Baha'i faith. And recently I've been delving into Stoicism and
Mhm.
just Stoic philosophy, and I think there's a lot of richness there. There's some quotes that are, straight out of cognitive behavioral therapy. I mean, it is really aligned. And again, it goes back to this is way before therapeutic models or
Mhm.
um, all of that stuff. But some of that again, that ancient wisdom, those things that
Mm.
we know as part of the human continuum, they continue to be relevant. So everything is information. I get inspired in a lot of ways, 360 degrees. If I'm working with students, they inspire me. If I'm working with people who are far more advanced than I am, they inspire me. I remember working for the county years ago, and I've worked for several counties, but this particular county, we would get a little jaded, right? And we would say, that's what you get for working with the county, or that's what it's like working with the county. You know what I mean? We would say that.
Yeah.
And I remember one time saying, that's how it is when you work for the county. And there was a secretary who said, I don't work for the county, I work for Jasmine. And what she was saying was, I may work here, but I work for my daughter, is what she
Mm.
was saying. Right. And that just struck me, and it gave me pause because it's like before I join into this, blowing things off, here's this person who, and I was a therapist at the time, who may not be listened to as much as people with degrees and all of that kind of stuff, but she imparted this very, very critical piece of wisdom that I've remembered. And it's now, probably 30 years later, that who do I work for?
Mhm.
It's not the employer that I work for. I have to work for something deeper. I have to work for something more meaningful. And
Yeah.
that's, just a powerful piece of wisdom that came from someone who a lot of people would, consider sort of invisible or part of the background. Wisdom can come from anywhere, anywhere. And I'm just thankful that, again, in being open and receptive to it, not only coming from the people who think they know everything, you
Right?
know, but
Yeah.
from all places and all corners. I mean, that has really, buoyed me in a lot of, challenging times.
Very consistent theme of what you're sharing is how you think about things, right? The mindset that you enter things. And we know this in cognitive behavior therapy, but it really expands beyond that. It's not a therapeutic tool, it's a human tool of your perspective shifting whatever the circumstance is. And, we all can bring our different perspectives to that and share as the secretary did, and how powerful that is in really being open to that message, but also carrying that wisdom and now sharing it with others. So thank you. One of the questions I have is if there's a big blessing or lesson that you've learned along the way, and I wonder if that was one of them or if you have another to share with us.
I would just say, and it's what I've said before, is just be open. I think
Mm.
I I'm one of those people who enjoys planning, but I'm not married to any of my plans. As a matter of fact, I would say that I stopped planning the big stuff sort of in my late 20s. I just stopped planning, I'm going to do this, I'm going to just being open to anything.
Yeah.
And what I've found over the years is what you're not supposed to be doing will fall away anyway. You might fight for it, but if you're fighting that hard,
Mhm.
is it for you? And usually the options that are not for you will fall away, and then there's a clear path to go. So I don't even have to, force it. There's that clear path ahead. And I would say that that's what got me the job that I'm in right now. And then unexpectedly, just being open, this area of regulation came across my path. And again, I was just like, okay, I was contacted, right? I didn't seek this. And I said, I'm willing to put my name in. Okay, yeah, I'm willing to go to that interview. Yeah, I'm willing to, and over the course of this, had a 3-month interview period, I fell in love with the organization, felt drawn to regulation. And not only that, it was like the end of the movie Usual Suspects, where all of the clues come together and here's
Yeah.
the real answer. It was as if all of the phases of my life before came together to
Quilted
fuel
together.
this one, next
Yeah.
phase to do this and to be fortified against some of the challenges that have come a part of this. But Never sought it, just being open. Be open. Be
I
open. I'll
I
let the universe say no. I'll be open and put my hat in or my name in. And then other things will happen and that might not work out, right?
right.
But at least be open. Shouldn't say no on yourself.
Such a powerful message of being guided in some way and just allowing that openness to kind of pull you in the direction of what that life mission is. And I think so many of us, it takes a while to trust to follow that kind of path and to go back to what you shared about what your mom said of do what you say you're going to do, right? And that really is a piece, I think, of following that path of just trusting that draw to what is coming and what's pulling you towards your life's mission and how
It's trust
powerful.
and it's proof also.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
as you go along, as you trust and you look back, you go, I tried that and I'm okay. So it's not a blind trust. I also believe in evidence. And
Yeah.
the evidence, every time I look back, the evidence has shown that you take a risk, you try to do things from your values,
Mhm.
and you end up okay. You end up on your feet. You things work out because I do believe that there is a wisdom larger than mine in operation, and so I think it is a trust. There's a feeling there, but then I look back in history and I was like, at
Mhm.
every stage, the proof is there. So then when I look forward, why not?
Easier to follow that. Yeah. Yeah, I used to think in my own career, in my own, path, like these things are so disconnected and, my interests were so, varied and yet similar to you, you can look back at points and, oh, well, that's why, because it's all like preparing me for this next
Exactly.
thing or a thing down the road that I would never have predicted. And I think that's where that kind of follow that gut, follow that instinct, follow that kind of what you're drawn to because you're picking up the skills that may not make sense at the moment, but can be of service down the road. And what a journey yours exemplifies in terms of all of those pieces and parts coming together. I'd love to give you time to kind of share things that are going on or things that you want to shout out for our community to get involved with or pay attention to.
Well, I guess I would want to encourage people to perhaps think about who they consider
Mm,
the they people, and imagine what it would be like to be one of them. I mean, because sometimes we think about, oh, our government, or it doesn't even have to be the government, our leaders in our organization, or those people who are making the decisions. It is not as hard a journey as you think to be one of those decision makers, to step up and be a part of the they that you have concerns about, and impact it from the inside. So, there may be places where, again, listen to that frustration. If you're frustrated that how this is happening and how that is happening, um, take the next step and be a part of change. And I just really think that's a responsibility, especially if you're operating again from your values, and if you truly believe in something, it's great to believe in it in the quiet of your own home, but I think it's also really important to translate that into action.
well, and such a powerful message, I feel, especially, with there's so many things going on in the world, and I feel a lot of folks have some very strong reactions,
Mhm.
and it's often
Me too.
verbalized but not acted on, right? And
Right.
I think the power of your message is take a little step to do an action towards that, not just to be part of an action of change, not just the voice of reaction. And
Hmm.
um,
One of the, oh, I was just, is
go ahead.
I was just going to add one of the grounding things that I've done, even in a staff meeting, is I pull up that NASA picture of, I think, Voyager 1 showing the Earth, pale blue dot, right? And ultimately, when we are in a mode, or when people are in a mode of, them and they and the other and all of this stuff, is recognizing we're all floating around on that one blue dot in the vastness of space. And if we can't just, unite over something, that's a huge problem. In the grand scheme of things, we're all just floating around on this pale blue dot. And so to me, the sort of othering that, and the splitting and the dividing that people engage in is fruitless, because there's just us here
Yeah.
keeping things in perspective.
I love that so much. And I could talk with you all day, and I want to be respectful of your time. I just am so grateful that we could have some conversation around these perspectives of leadership and entrepreneurship and the bigger pieces of how all that comes together, but it comes together through those small steps, through a collective movement, through um, a bigger picture of doing and helping others. So thank you so, so very much, Stacy, for honoring a conversation today. And I wrap up every episode with a quote. I always select them a day or two before. I know a little bit of the things we'll talk about, but I don't know exactly where our conversation is going. And it always amazes me the quote that jumps out and the quote that I share at the end here. I chose one from Helen Keller, and her quote is, "Alone we can do so little. Together we can do so much." And how that just summarizes all that you've shared today. Thank you so very much for being here.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thank you for the invitation. Delighted to be here.
I'm so glad you joined me for this episode of the Inspired Hive podcast. Be sure to stay connected by following us on social media at Inspired Hive Podcast, and subscribe to stay updated on all our upcoming episodes. I'll catch you next time. Until then, live inspired.